Hey, thanks for checking out Nuts and Bolts with Tone. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to go over something a little bit different. So when we check AC systems, we think AC machine, you know, hook it up and check it and then diagnose it from there. All right. So a couple things that you want to note, that you want to notate before, and I touched on this before. You want to notate those Schrader valve caps. Make sure they're not wet. I touched on this on a Prius video to make sure they're not wet. But on any vehicle, you want to do two things before you hook up your machine. So once you hook up your machine, this is null and void. When you open up the caps, listen for any sort of a tss. If you hear any bit of a tss, that means that there's a leak there, because that means that there's pressure and it's escaping the cap, and the cap is keeping the pressure in. It's obviously going to leak out past the cap because the cap's not, you know, sealed solid, but it will help keep it from leaking as bad as if you had no cap on there. The other thing is look in your Schrader caps. I just did a CRV and both the caps were dry, but when I took off the low side, no, when I took off the high side, so I knew I had a leak there. All right, so a few important testing tips for you when you're testing AC. One, now this is especially for General Motors, especially in early vehicles. I know it seems unorthodox to use a scan tool when testing AC systems, but a scan tool can be your friend. And there's two scenarios I'm going to give you. One of them is in newer vehicles. A lot of times the newer compressors, they are not a clutch on, clutch off, clutch on, clutch off type of compressor. They are variable displacement compressors. So it varies it varies the pressure. In some of them they use a wobble plate. In the Chevy Avios they use a wobble plate, and it moves around to adjust compression, and it doesn't have a clutch. It doesn't work on a clutch system. So the compressor looks like it's always on. So those actually have a sensor in it. And so a lot of times in those type of AC systems, you'll get a code. So I had a compressor, I had a Chevy truck, a fairly newer Chevy truck, and AC didn't work. Hook it up, it's got a code for the compressor. Little testing, found out that the electronics on the compressor were bad. So that's one reason you want to do it. You always want to do it because it'll tell you if there's any codes in the system, especially if you have an automatic system or if it's a newer vehicle. It's a little bit smarter. The older ones are kind of stupid. Unless it's an automatic system, sometimes it will set codes. However, I've found that most older vehicles won't set codes for any sort of HVAC issues, even if it doesn't work. Sometimes you can get, like, you know, evap temp sensor faults, and then that'll tell you, like, let's say you're sitting there and your evap, your AC system's running, and then, you know, older Nissan pickups sitting there, the AC's running, and then all of a sudden your compressor cuts off. You have no scan tool data. There's no nothing. You can sit there and test everything till you're blue in the face. But there's one thing you can't test, and that's the evap temp sensor. You have to access it and then test it. It's not like you can test it, you know, with a scan tool or anything like that. So sometimes those temp sensors in the early Nissans, I had an 85 Nissan pickup, and the AC kept cutting off, and I didn't know why. It took me, and I didn't have as much experience, and it took me a while to figure out it was the temp sensor. Temp sensor was bad, made the AC system think it was freezing up, so it cut the compressor until the resistance changed in the sensor, and then it said, okay, time to turn on, cut back off again. Now that was the 85 Nissan. I've had that in newer Nissans, in the 2000s. Frontiers, Xteras, things like that. So evap temp sensors will cause a AC compressor to not work when it's failed, but you won't have a code. So in the older vehicles, let's say you have an older vehicle and it has an accumulator. And on the accumulator, there's a 2-wire switch. Well, that switch, basically power is sent out and it goes to that switch. It's a clutch cycling switch a lot of times. So low pressure switch. So a lot of times the power is sent out to that switch. And as long as that switch sees Freon, it will pass and open up and allow the power to continue through to the compressor. If that switch is bad, it will block the current flow and you will have no power. Well, these sometimes are a little difficult to test because a lot of times they have big fat connectors and you can't back probe them. So there's a real easy test. The first test is pull it off and check and see if you have power on one of the pins. If you have power on one of the pins, okay, great. You know your fuse is good, your controller's good, Everything is telling the AC system to work, except for something else that you don't know yet. So a real easy test on those is disconnect it, you have power, take a paper clip and jump across that 2-wire sensor. If the AC clutch kicks on, your sensor's bad. I just had a Chevy truck not that long ago, about a week ago. It was in the 2000s maybe it was late 90s. That's what was wrong with it. Pulled the switch off, checked the switch, wasn't passing power. Jumped the switch, compressor kicked on. Now, the reason that you want to use a scan tool in older vehicles is I just had a 95 Chevy Caprice and came in for diagnostic on the clutch. They already charged it up. Clutch wasn't working. And so I got to figure this out. It's a 95 Caprice. So easy test, 2-wire clutch cycling switch. It has power. I jump it, no change. All right, switch is good. Plug it back in. All right, keep checking it. Well, the wiring diagram, unfortunately, the wiring diagram was missing a key component in this AC system. And this is why you want a scan tool. I had a limo, 2000s Chevy limo, and might have been a Cadillac, but anyways, GM, and same thing, clutch wouldn't kick on. So what's wrong with it? All right, well, let me show you what was wrong with it. All right, so this guy right here, this is an AC pressure transducer. There is 3 pins in there. 3 pins, all right? So good luck finding a testing procedure for this. So you got to kind of wing it. So the first easy test, if you have a GM vehicle, hook up a scan tool and go to the computer, go to the powertrain management, and you're going to see an IAC pressure pin. That's the high pressure pin. You're also going to see an AC relay, AC request pin, and an AC relay pin. Now in this case, it said AC request yes, AC relay no, AC pressure 287 pounds. Okay, so this is a 80. Remember, this is a 95 Caprice. This isn't in the wiring diagram. There's no pressure transducer in there. And so what do you do when there's no testing and it's not in the wiring diagram? What does it have? Well, you figure out what it needs and what it has, and you just kind of use logic. So in my case, what I did was first thing I did was disconnected it, and the pressure switch went to 3. It read 3 PSI. Well, that told me that one, the connection from the switch to the computer was good, and because it saw that I disconnected it, because it's looking at the signal back. Obviously, now this tells you a lot of things when you do a test like that. Obviously you have power to it, because if you didn't have power to it, nothing would have changed when you disconnected it. That's the first thing. The other thing is, you most likely had power to it because it wouldn't have read 287 PSI. So disconnect it. What do you have? I had 5 volts on one pin, ground on the other. I already know my signal to the PCM is good because it went to 3 when I disconnected it. So I recommended a transducer. And now one more thing about this, and this actually came up with this specific vehicle. I recommended an evac and recharge and this sensor. Well, so one of the guys in the office said, well, why do you need an evac and recharge when there's a Schrader in there? You got a Schrader valve in there. So this should keep the pressure in, right? Well, good thing, and I said, hey man, sometimes these things leak. If it leaks, then I have to evac and recharge it. So just sell an evac and recharge and the switch. So the machine was about halfway done with recovering, and I thought, let me just see what happens. So I started to crack the switch loose. As soon as it opened up, as soon as it let go of that Schrader, it started pissing out dye. And I was like, oh crap. So then I had to tighten it back up. And I mean, luckily it was almost done because the O-ring pinched, putting it back in. So then I went ahead and when I had my new switch, I put a new Schrader valve in there, new switch, new O-ring because this one tore. And then I went with my rule of thumb. What do you always do? Always replace the Schrader valves. So there's the high and the low Schrader valve, and there's the Schrader valve from the high pressure switch. New pressure switch, evac and recharge, vacuum test passed, charged it up, started it up, boom, compressor's on. Now it's reading correctly. So I would have went around in circles with this car Had I not looked at that pit, the same thing with the Cadillac, the limo that I did, same exact situation. Super high pressure on the high pressure switch. It's not going to allow the AC system to turn on because it's over pressurized. Now the other bad thing about this was it was a 95, and so if you go try to find description and operation of the system, it doesn't even tell you there's a pressure transducer. It doesn't tell you that it operates on, a lot of times you can find parameters in all data. What is the parameters of the system? 95 Saturn. This was a 98 Saturn, and the parameters for a 98 Saturn cooling system is 221 degrees for the cooling system. When the temp hits 221, the fan kicks on. Well, in a Saturn, it's kind of a bummer because the temp gauge in a Saturn always rides a little over half. So it looks like it's overheating. Now, I battled this a long time ago. This is telling you the importance of looking up parameters. I battled this a long time ago when I used to work on a lot of Saturns. The guy in the shop just yesterday, hey man, I got this Saturn, it's overheating. I just did a cooling system work on it. Okay, cool. So, well, what he was doing was he would see it go over half and he'd turn on the AC to make the fans come on. Well, are the fans coming on? Should they be on? Look up a Scantool, 2 bids, AC fan request and coolant temp. As soon as that temp hit 221 on the graph, actually I think it changed. As soon as it hit 221, fans kicked on. And it went up to 222, and then the fans kicked on. Yes, brought the temp down. So you want to make sure you look up the parameters, but a lot of times, like I'm saying, they're not there. So deductive thinking is that an AC system, the high side should operate about 150 PSI. 200 if it's hot, okay? You start getting over 200, you got a problem. Well, 287 is too high. When you get that hot, when you get that high, your AC system's not cooling the vehicle off anymore. And so then it'll cut it off until the pressure drops. So now this is important why you use a scan tool when testing AC. I know it seems weird, but make sure you do that. Make sure you check these Schraders. All of these things are going to help you, 1, get to your diagnosis faster, and 2, prevent you from having comebacks. In the past, before I started replacing Schrader valves all the time, this is the kind of scenario that would happen. Car would come in, somebody would do AC work, and then it would come back a week later, and it would come to me. I was the foreman. Come to me, AC system's empty. All right, charge it up. AC system works fine. Disconnect the gauges. Crap, the Schraders are leaking. Now I got to go and sell an evac and recharge, Schrader valves, do all of that. I get all done. Well, now guess what? Now it's back again a week later with a leak again. Well, Schraders are good, so what's leaking? There's no external leaks. It's the evap cord. But now this took 3 times of coming in the shop to get to the evap cord because of that time with the Schrader valves. This is why Schrader valves are so important. And it might not leak. I just did one this morning, Chevy Cruze, 0.15 pounds low. Got done with the AC service, everything worked. Got done with the AC service, looked down the low side port, and then bubble, 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 bubble coming out of the low side port. Need Schraders and an evac and recharge. So AC systems AC is one of those things that is a great job as long as everything goes well and you can get the car in and out and the car doesn't have to come back. Now that's also another thing because it can come back 2 or 3 times and it sucks. And then the office gets mad, the boss gets mad. You did everything you thought you were doing right. So an evap core sometimes take a week after it comes in for service to show a leak. You know that there's no external leaks, it's got dye in there, it's losing freon, it's coming from the evap core. So do these tips, they'll help you get to your answer faster, also keep the boss happy, keep the customers happy, and keep them coming back for more. So thanks for watching this video. I hope it was informative, hope I taught you something, and hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the bell. You get notified of all my future content, which you're definitely going to want to see. Also check me out on Instagram, Nuts and Bolts with Tone, Daily Life as a Mechanic. I'm super swamped right now, so I haven't really been able to post much, but you know, hey, what are you gonna do? Can't complain. I got tons of work. So anyways, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.